an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your host, Dr. J, and as always, we have a fascinating show for you today. Before we bring on our guest, let's talk about some news. First, I hope everybody out there has had a fabulous week and has stayed as cool as they can in this ridiculous heat. But even in the heat, people still manage to be outside capturing anomalous objects, whether they're military or from somewhere else. That remains the question. And of course, that's why we need more people out there to become researchers. We need more people who have actually seen things, captured things, to tell your stories, share your photos. Let's go with three of some of the bigger news that I found today. And of course, there's so many more, so much news that I can't give. Otherwise, the entire show would be dedicated to that. And for those of you out there who've been feeding me the news, thank you for that. And continue to do so. All you have to do is go to drjradiolive.com and use the contact button and send whatever you want that way. And guest requests, I take them very, very seriously. So again, to all of you who have asked for what you asked who you wanted, I've brought them. And also those of you who have asked to remain anonymous, I have done so. Here comes the news. Now this is a quote. Aliens ahoy! Massive mothership the size of Idaho caught in NASA images, says ufologist. This comes from RT, which is Russia Today. I thought that was really fascinating. Another one comes from our good friends Open Minds. I believe Alejandro Rojas wrote this one. UFOs caught on video by two vision cameras near Tucson, Arizona. Well, being in Arizona, Open Minds, they're based in Tempe, Arizona. They get a lot of Arizona reports, but I think that's just, a daily occurrence. If you all recall, June had double the number of reports, according to MUFON. I thought that was a very, very fantastic speculation and number, because that's not the number of things caught on video. That a good argument could be made that everyone has a cell phone camera or some sort of recording device, and that's why you're seeing more images, and plus there's more Photoshop and more hoaxes. But that wasn't the story. The story was more sightings reported. So are more people talking or more people seeing things? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's a good thing to get us to the truth. The final piece of news I'm going to leave you with before I bring on our guest today to talk about this news too, and of course so many other things, actually comes from NASA, but I'm going to read the CNN quote. Kepler 452b finds, and this is in quote, Earth's bigger, older cousin. I believe it's 1.5 times the size. I don't have all the details of the distance, but I think it's a super fantastic find, considering that's what they've been looking for, the Goldilocks planets. Now, how we're going to get there, that's a whole different story, and that's why we are going to bring on our hour one guest, the godfather of ufology, 58 years in ufology, researching, lecturing, literally going around the world. The only person that has testified at the actual Congress in, I believe, 1968, and again, 45 years later in 2013 at the Citizen UFO hearing, Mr. Stanton Friedman, who I'd like to say Stan the man. Mr. Friedman, welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here, as usual.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's go with the last piece of news. The first thing I wanted to ask you about. What do you think about this new Kepler 452b that was found, of course, by the new Kepler telescope, which has found so much more than those who haven't been paying attention, and of course the Hubble telescope?
Well, it's an entirely different system from Hubble. Hubble is in fairly close orbit around the Earth. It's a huge telescope able to see all kinds of things, and it can look almost anywhere. However, Kepler is looking at it's in orbit around the Earth, but an elongated orbit. It goes out and comes back, and goes out and comes back. It's looking at a chunk of the sky about the size of your fist at arm's length. One of the reports I saw said it's looking around the Milky Way. No, it isn't. It's looking at this tiny hunk of sky. And it's still finding an incredible number of planets because it seems certain, even though there will be better instrumentation later, but it seems certain that the galaxy and probably other galaxies are just full of planets. It's apparently a natural part of the, call it the life cycle of stars, that when, the number varies, the size of the planets vary, their orbit around the stars vary, but there's a ton of them out there. And it's one of those things. 50 years ago, there were plenty of arrogant earthlings who were saying basically, hey, we got the only solar system around and we're on the only planet that's covered with water, and so we're top of the heap. And now we're more close to the bottom of the heap because we haven't been around that long. This new planet, the sun, the star that it circles around, is over 6 billion years old, and we're a mere 4-point-something or other billion years old. So we have no basis at all, except our ego and our arrogance, for saying that we're the top dogs. So it's an interesting find, and we've been expecting it, and those guys deserve a lot of credit. The sensitivity of the Kepler is extraordinary, the equivalent, in rough terms, of being able to look at a car headlight a mile away and catch a butterfly going in front of the headlight. That's a pretty neat trick. And so I got to give it to those guys. I admire really good technology, and they've got it. And, it's kind of like I admire this Pluto bypass, if you will. That 9.5 years. And you notice, or at least, and none of the coverage of the Pluto, the New Horizons space mission, did I see a mention, that may be there, but I haven't seen it, of the fact that it's got a radioisotope thermoelectric generator, RTGs they're called, providing the power. Over 200 watts. It's been operating for almost 10 years. There's no battery on board. It's plutonium dioxide, Pu-238. No, it's not fissionable. You can't use it in a bomb. There's about 24 pounds of the stuff, and it's been producing power steadily. It loses about 4 watts a year. And you have to remember that some people think it's solar power. Hey, when you get out to the distance of Pluto from the sun compared to the Earth, the solar intensity, the amount of energy received from the sun at that distance, is about 1,000 times less than it is at Earth. So obviously solar power won't do the job. And RTGs have powered essentially all the deep space probes, the Cassini, and there's a whole bunch of them out around Saturn and Jupiter and so forth. They're really neat devices. They're not cheap, but you don't go to Walmart to buy one. But when you think about it, over 9 years, steady operation, that is quite remarkable. So I was very pleased to see the stuff about Pluto, and one of the things that pleased me was there were surprises. That's why one does research. If one knew everything, one wouldn't have to do research. So we got a lot more information that's going to be coming from that system. I hope the instruments keep working for a long period of time. But they will have power, no question about that. And wherever we've looked around the solar system, we find surprises, because despite our arrogance, we are also ignorant. And that leads to the question about the radio telescope search for extraterrestrial intelligence. There was a lot of noise about that this week, too. Huge story, a surprising story to me anyway. Yuri Milner, a Soviet billionaire, is putting up $100 million to be spent over a period of between 5 and 10 years, listening for signals using a radio telescope in Australia and another one in Ohio, to listen for signals from outer space.
But do you think that's though a little outdated? Because I saw an article a few months ago that maybe the reason we haven't been receiving much via radio is because we should be actually probably looking for maybe artificial light on other planets. And SETI was possibly looking at maybe even changing tactics of looking into these new planets that they're finding, the new Goldilocks planets, to see if there's artificial light on that.
Well, I think, look, I'm not a fan of SETI. I call it a silly effort to investigate. It's based on a number of strange premises. There's nobody coming here. Look, if there's somebody coming here, why would you look out there? You'd look here. Learn sign language. Don't tell me about radio signals. There is not a shred of evidence so far that anybody intelligent out there, we won't ask the question, is there intelligent life on Earth? We certainly don't act like it some of the time. But there is not a shred of evidence that I have seen that there are signals coming from intelligent beings out there to Earth. There's an enormous amount of evidence indicating aliens are visiting Earth, even if they don't want to talk to the SETI community. And, you know, it's kind of crazy. $100 million over several years is enough to get people excited about doing research with radio telescopes. Do I think it's a sensible way to find out about intelligent aliens? No, I don't. I mean, you know, physical trace cases, radar visual sightings, abduction cases, all the proof that there is a cover-up, call it what you want, a cosmic Watergate, I like. Why aren't we spending a tiny fraction of that amount on those things? One reason might be the government would be very unhappy if they did. And people say, what are you, a conspiracy theorist? No. It's easy, truly easy to demonstrate that we're not being told the truth about UFOs, or not being told what we've already learned, even if that doesn't include everything there is to be learned. Example one, the National Security Agency, in response to a legal action under Freedom of Information a number of years ago, released 156 top secret Umbra pages of UFO documents. The problem was that you could only read one line per page. Everything else was whited out.
And that's actually a little bit better than some of the other redacted ones where they were blacked out and all you could see is the date.
Well, that's the CIA.
Yeah.
Their buddies at the CIA, you see. The Washington Post a couple of years back said that the total military intelligence budget for the United States was $52.6 billion. That includes the CIA, the NSA, and also the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. That was the annual budget 2 years ago.
It doesn't sound right. $52 million. I would think it would be
billion.
I would think it would be maybe closer to. I mean, I'm just speculating with all these operations going on and wars going on. I would think it would be. I don't know. I mean, what's our annual budget in the trillion?
The military budget for the world is $1 trillion, but I'm talking about the military budget for the United States government. $52.6 billion in 1 year. That's a lot of money. We're not talking about buying tanks and guns and stuff. You know, we're talking about spies and listening and spy satellites, of course. But that's a heck of a lot of money. And the reason I mentioned that, what I've found is that what I call the ancient academics and fossilized physicists don't have any concept, it appears to me, of how much money is spent on advanced research and development outside of academia. And, you know, we're talking, for an example, Los Alamos lab, they have over 7,000 employees. And their budget annual these years is running $2.2 billion for that one lab. That's a lot of money. We're not talking about 20 professors and 40 grad students. We're talking about a massive effort. Lots of people involved in all kinds of interesting, exciting, and classified work. So the perspective that I find, well, let me give you another example. I've had several people tell me, Stan, if Roswell really had happened, as I'm convinced it did, they would have had to pull all of physics profs out of their campuses. How absurd. The guys you pull out have to have very high-level security clearances, and there are plenty of them working under government contract, like at Los Alamos, at Livermore, at Hanford Works, at Oak Ridge. These are major installations with all kinds of professional people working there, and like the people who worked on stealth aircraft and stuff like that in industry. They're not in academia. So, there are questions. We don't know a lot about what some of these guys are doing. That's the whole point. The work is classified, and I don't have a need to know. I get asked questions from people that would imply that I have been pipelined to the inside story on Roswell, for example. Sure, I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. And that goes back to the 70s. But I certainly don't have a need to know or a high-level security clearance. I had a Q clearance for 14 years, but that wouldn't have gotten me into the UFO scene.
No,
and I
Q
certainly don't
clearance.
now.
I'm glad you brought that up. Isn't that the highest level clearance you can have above top secret
Well,
for a civilian? And
I wouldn't call it that. I would say it's the point of the Q clearance is access to nuclear information.
Yes. It's by the AEC, right?
Well, there is no AEC anymore. There's Department of Energy, and there are all kinds of people, like I mentioned, the spy companies, if you will, the CIA, NSA, NRO. But what you want is a top secret code word clearance. That's why I said top secret Umbra. It isn't enough to have a top secret clearance to see that information. You got to have an appropriately the word after top secret. It can be ultra, it can be Umbra. You got to be read into that project. And there are some projects that only 5 people have access to. And the thing is, the need to know is a big part of this story. When I was working on radiation shielding for General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, it's a small program. In 1958, we spent $100 million. We employed 3,500 people, of whom 1,100 were engineers and scientists. So it wasn't an enormous program. A pretty good size compared to college research and development. But I found in classified abstracts papers about radiation shielding being done by the Navy. And I couldn't get them. I had the right clearance. But I didn't have a need to know. And the nuclear Navy people said, no way, Jose, we're not giving you a need to know. This is our stuff. And incidentally, one of the big mysteries in the whole question of UFOs is, where is the data from the Navy? And I recently got a letter back from the Office of Naval Intelligence. I sent a Freedom of Information Act request to them for UFO stuff. We don't have any, they said. And look, I've talked to loads of former Navy people who tell me about sightings while they're on the ocean. So there's a place, a complete cover-up. The curtain is down. We don't get any of that stuff. And I wish Yuri Milner, who's given this $100 million for SETI, would spend a little of it to take legal action against the Navy and, the NSA and those for UFO stuff. But, think about it. The Navy, we have the world's largest Navy. We got loads of ships and planes and personnel out there. They obviously have a pretty good view of the sky, and they have to monitor the skies so that we don't have another Pearl Harbor kind of thing. I mean, don't tell me they're not looking at the skies. They are looking at the skies. So it would be nice to file an action against the Navy to say, okay, I believe you. The ONI doesn't have anything. Who does? And I say that because we have the dear old General Carol Bollinger memo. You remember that one. That's the one that says sightings which could affect national security are made in accordance with JNAP 146, Joint Army Navy Air Force Publication 146, or Air Force Manual 55-11, and are not part of the Blue Book system. This was said in 1969, and it resulted in the closure of Project Blue Book. But he also said, we have this in writing. I think it was released by mistake, but anyway, he also said that if we close Project Blue Book, which has always been touted for many years anyway, as the only government group concerned with UFOs, if we close Project Blue Book, the public won't have a place to report sightings. However, as previously noted, reports which could affect national security will continue to be investigated using the procedures designed for that purpose. Now, that's an extraordinary statement that contradicts every statement the Air Force has made for the last 40 years. I called General Bolander 10 years later. I didn't see the memo until 10 years later. And he agreed with me. There are two independent channels, one for stuff that could affect national security and one run-of-the-mill sightings. You mentioned earlier the number of sightings has gone up. Yeah, MUFON had over 1,100 sightings last month, sighting reports. Now, I find that when I check my audiences that after my lecture, I still don't have courage enough to do it before my lecture, I find that 10% of the people have had a sighting, but 90% of them didn't report it, mainly because of fear of ridicule.
And that's one thing that's actually changed now, right? And that's why I was making that argument earlier. Do you think the reason why we have more reports is because less people fear ridicule as opposed to 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago?
Well, I think that's part of the story. But I think the Kepler findings, the attitudes of the last few years have changed. I constantly get young people tell me, well, surely we're not alone. There were plenty of people who 30, 40, 50 years ago would say that we're the only civilization, because if there was somebody out there, we would know about it. We're so smart. The arrogance has gone out of that perception, I think.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the noisy negativists, as you coined the term, even when I was in elementary school, we were told there is no other solar system. This is it. And this is the only planet that has water and life on it. And all is out there are stars and gas and dust. That's it. No other planets. And this is what I was taught in my generation. So
sorry about that.
Yeah. So obviously all these educators in that era, especially, I can't even imagine what was going on in the era before that, which happened to your era, is a very scary thought. I'm sure they're probably kicking themselves in or biting their tongue from what the findings are today, because they were so conclusively sure that we were alone, that there was nothing out there. And I'm sure when Kepler found the first planet, extrasolar, or however you want to call it, planet that exists outside of our solar system, probably blew them away, especially when they found the first Goldilocks planet.
Well, they were expecting to find something, because they had more sense than the ancient academics and fossilized physicists. And, look, there's my book, Science Was Wrong, by Kathleen Marden and I, has 14 chapters, each one devoted to dealing with a false claim made by a smart person. And it is interesting that one of the people involved with this thing that Yuri Milner is funding, listening for signals, one of the guys is Lord Rees, the R-E-E-S, the British Astronomer Royal. He's the same guy who not very long ago said that only kooks see UFOs. Did he give a source for that misinformation? No. Is there any basis for it? No. It's total nonsense. But he's part of the group that's pushing this SETI stuff, if you will. And so, I don't mind keeping some of those guys working. What the hell? What else are they going to do? We don't want them to collect unemployment. But if you're talking about searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, the data says it's coming here. We don't know what they're doing out there. And there's another thing. We act as if technology doesn't change. And my rule is just the reverse of that. That technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. Now, to think that people are stuck at our level of technology, radio signals, seems to me to be quite absurd. And the example I use, I don't use a slide rule anymore. I did when I started working in industry a long time ago, but there are better ways of making calculations today than using slide rules. There are better ways of doing almost anything that you can think of. You could say, how long does it take to go around planet Earth? Well, Magellan set the record, or his ship did. He didn't make it. 3 years. But that was back in 1523. Now, today the space station does it. Didn't 3 guys just go up today, I think, to join the space station? It does it in just under 100 minutes.
So I was just going to say, yeah, a little over 90 minutes, under 2 hours, a little over 90 minutes, just like you said, under 100 minutes. That's an insane amount. So you have 3 years, 500 years ago, or 400 plus years ago, almost 500, and now you have under 2 hours. I mean, can you imagine what the people in that era, if they were alive today, they're probably rolling in their graves.
Well, they'd say, I want a piece of the action. That's exciting, man.
Yes. I want to say a couple things because we're getting clear halfway. And first of all, just in case before we run out of time, I want people to be able to find you. Let's talk real quick about your websites and upcoming tours and anything like that.
Well, my website is www.stantonfriedman.com. That's FRIEDMAN.com. And that lists my lectures, and I'll be speaking, you'll see the list of lectures in a place called Liverpool, Nova Scotia. I'm giving a paper on the 8th of August at a conference, Paracon East, a paranormal convention, shorthand form. And my paper there will be the first time I've given this one, is Crash Saucers from Roswell to Shag Harbor, which isn't too far from where I'm going to be in Liverpool. That's exciting. It's listed on my website. And then a few weeks later, I'll be at the Experiencers Conference in Portland. And then I'll be doing research down where I was supposed to be last year, but a little heart attack got in the way at the American Philosophical Society.
Thank God you're okay, though. Yeah.
And then I will be speaking at the Incident at Exeter location, Exeter, New Hampshire, the 5th and 6th of September. They have the 50th anniversary of the Incident at Exeter, and that was John Fuller's book. Same guy who wrote The Interrupted Journey about Betty and Barney Hill. And he did a fine job on that. And it was an excellent case, and I love the explanation that the debunkers put forward. It was an aircraft refueling operation.
Huh. I love
really,
that.
and it was down below tree level. Boy, that's a neat trick. What did you say?
Yeah, refuel aerially under tree level. That makes perfect sense, right? What are they going to refuel?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you want to keep it quiet. We don't want the Russians to spy on it. I mean, it's absurd, but it's typical. If the first explanation doesn't work, try the second. If that doesn't work, try the third. Because we know there are no alien visitors to Earth. If there were, we smart debunkers would know about it. That's the kind of crazy reasoning we're dealing with here.
But fortunately, though, we have amazing people that are interested, and that's one of the reasons not only did I want people to be able to find you and know your books. I'm glad you mentioned Science Was Wrong. You've also co-written, of course, with Kathleen Marden, Captured, which was the newest update on Betty and Barney Hill. You wrote Crash and Corona. Several others. If you want to list those names,
Flying Saucers and Science was the one I'm proudest of because that's my own, just me.
Crash and Corona too. Wasn't that your own?
Which?
Crash and Corona.
With Don Berliner.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I did most of the research. He did most of the writing. He's written lots of stuff. I'm a latecomer to this book writing business. I'm the who's the famous artist?
Da Vinci?
No, a woman who didn't start painting until she was over 60, something like that. Anyway, I'll think of her name next week. We old guys got to watch out for that. But I've enjoyed writing the books. I wish I'd gotten started sooner, but I was busy. 700 lectures. I put a lot of miles on the old bod, man.
Speaking about what you've done, actually, we have a question or something from a listener. This is Nico from Chicago, and he wants to know. It says, "How is Stan's health doing?" And this is from TuneIn.
Oh, well, okay.
We care about
Admittedly,
They care
June
about it too.
27th, June 27th last year, I had a heart attack, and it kept me from attending the MUFON conference, and it kept me from attending Roswell. And so I've already been at Roswell this year. I had to spend a week in the hospital just because of the timing, and it was board stiff. Read several books. They put in 2 stents. I'm working fine. Haven't even taken any nitro, and I've got a fairly heavy schedule. If you look at the website, I will be at the MUFON conference in California, Irvine, California, September roughly the 24th. I should look at the calendar here. Yeah, 24th.
Yeah, the symposium. That's right. It's going to be a very big deal. As a matter of fact, you're going to be there. I know Paul Hellier's going to be there.
Yes.
I highly recommend that. I look forward to seeing you there again. And speaking of lectures, this is one of the things I want to get in before. I know you can't do this full 2-hour show. You're only doing this 1-hour show. I want to make it a point that at their lectures, you said one thing, and I want to say the second thing, that only after you speak do you ask the question how many people have seen something, and then how many people have reported it, which is virtually none of them, or a small portion of them, 10% of them.
10%.
And another thing I want to make a big point of is it's not necessarily tinfoil hat kooks that are attending these lectures. You've lectured in front of some of the most prestigious people. Last interview we did, you talked about. I asked you what were some of your best and your best and worst experiences in lecturing, and you talked about an experience where you were invited to speak in, I believe, Saudi Arabia, where Bill Clinton
Yes.
happened to be in the audience, and another one with Bill Gates.
No, he spoke. He was a keynote speaker, but he wasn't there when we had our 75 minutes of fame, when 5 of us were on a panel in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, of all places, talking about flying saucers. Nick Pope was there. I was there. Michio Kaku was there. Jacques Vallée was there, and there was a scientist from Arabia, and I can't remember his name. I had trouble pronouncing it at the time. And we were very well received. The people paid $1,000 to attend this 3-day event, incidentally. So we had captains of industry and chief pilots and stuff like that. It was an interesting experience.
Top CEOs and important people, and that just goes to show the level of people who the interest in ufology literally
no
spans
question,
all around.
Engineering societies, sections of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, American Nuclear Society section at Los Alamos. We had 500 people there. Engineering Society of Detroit, one of my early big lectures, 1,008 people for dinner and a talk, and there weren't any negative questions. So yeah, I've been out there. I put it out on the line. All 50 states, colleges in all 50 states, 10 provinces, and 18 other countries. So I more than put my foot in the water. I hope I haven't put my foot in my mouth.
No. You haven't, but let me ask you this, because another tweet just came in from a listener, and we've been getting a lot of questions lately from the listeners that because Jeremy Corbell spoke the other day about finding a new witness to corroborate Bob Lazar's story, and it happened to be, I think, Krangle was the name. And here's
Dr. Krangle, yeah. Dr. Robert Krangle, PhD.
Here's the question. This comes from Graviton Fish. Not to be confrontational with Stanton, but his opinion on new witness would be interesting. What is your opinion on this so-called witness? What do you think?
Obviously, when I first heard about him, I didn't have an opinion. My rule is have facts in hand before putting mouth in gear. So I called him. Was able to find his number, and I spoke with him. We had a long talk, very comfortable talking to him. He's a scientist who worked from time to time as a consultant to Los Alamos. And there were a couple of things that were clear. One, no surprise, he had seen Bob Lazar at Los Alamos, and I say no surprise because the phone book for Los Alamos had Bob's name in it. aren't a lot of Robert S. Lazars, And it gave a number, and that was the number, as it happens, of the big Clinton P. Anderson Mason Accelerator, unique nuclear physics facility. That doesn't make him a scientist, because they got all kinds of technicians out there. But there's no question he was there, and there's no question he had a security clearance. But again, you can't get into Los Alamos and spend any time there without a security clearance. You certainly can't work there without one. That's the rule of the game. Whenever I visited there, when I was working on nuclear rockets for Westinghouse, our security officer had to send my credentials, an indication of my security level, my clearance level, to Los Alamos. I couldn't get in without that. So, okay, he verified that Bob had been seen there and that Bob had a security clearance. He was at briefings that had classified material. However, when I asked him, well, did you check on his credentials in any way? No, of course not. Why would he? Now, he said he looked like a scientist. He had the pocket protector, the glasses, Everybody thought of him as doing some kind of scientific work, and I've never denied that. But no, and the interesting thing is he got his PhD from, Krangle did, from MIT. But several years before, Bob claims to have been there. And of course, my big objection, which Jeremy nor anybody else has corrected, George Knapp says he doesn't think Bob have those degrees that he claimed. And I say that's one reason that I don't believe what he says about back engineering flying saucers, because if he can't tell the truth about himself, and I checked MIT, and I checked Caltech, and I checked his high school, and he was in the bottom third of his class, he couldn't have received a degree. He couldn't have been admitted to MIT. He also claimed at the Little Alien, that wonderful hamburger joint in Nevada, that he named a certain guy as having been a professor of physics at Caltech when he was there. Well, I called that guy. He's a member of the American Physical Society, to which I belong to, of course, and which Bob doesn't belong. And he never taught at Caltech, only at Pierce Junior College, and he did have Bob in a class there. Now, Bob also said that his credentials were wiped out, if you will, at MIT. Well, if he didn't have any credentials and he didn't go there, then that's a lie as well. So the guy's obviously a bright guy. I watched him speak in Arizona. I'm not saying he's a stupid jerk or anything like that. I've never said that. He's bright. He built a jet-powered car. He puts on fireworks displays. I don't doubt that he did some technical work out at Los Alamos. But how you go from that to back engineering flying saucers, especially when he claims that, and now he's denying, but it's on record, he claims that Los Alamos had 500 pounds of element 115, which would be most remarkable because the half-life is less than a couple of minutes, and there's no way anybody has 500 or 10 pounds of element 115. So Dr. Krangle did provide evidence for those who think that Bob never worked at Los Alamos and those who think he didn't have a security clearance. He did not provide any particular indication that Bob was a scientist or worked anywhere, Area 51 or S4 or whatever, on back engineering UFOs, which is the whole thing that makes his story so exciting. So I talked to Krangle. I didn't hear what Jeremy said recently, of course, but I know I talked specifically about whether Dr. Krangle had, he didn't know who I was. Why should he? And I gave him enough background, I guess, to let him know that I belong to the American Physical Society. He can look me up in the American Nuclear Society and so forth. He can check on me. But he did not provide any kind of evidence. He didn't try to. Didn't say he had any. That Bob had worked on back engineering flying saucers. And look, I think George Knapp is probably the top journalist in ufology. Seriously. He's been at it a long time. He's a great speaker. I've heard him. And he knows his stuff. And when my book Flying Saucers and Science came out, to be on Coast to Coast, I wanted George to be the one who interviewed me. And he was. And he read the book, and he asked great questions. It was a fine interview, because I have the greatest respect for him. I don't understand why, when he says that Bob didn't tell the truth about his degrees and stuff, why he believes everything else. But that's George's and my problem. Jeremy did not, Dr. Krangle didn't say, oh, yes, I checked, and he was a physicist working for Los Alamos. I saw his name, his job title or whatever on some kind of piece of paper. Nobody has said that.
So he confirmed to you that he worked there, or that he ran into him? Is that what he basically said?
He saw him a few times there. He knew who he was. And it once the big noise hit the fan, he certainly was aware that Bob was no longer working there, and he may have been talking out of turn on classified stuff he didn't know. So there's no question. There was a real Bob Lazar who really was at Los Alamos, and I've not disputed that. But that's why I went further, because people were asking me, as a known nuclear physicist, did I buy into his story? And I wasn't going to say yes or no without checking on it. And I was shocked. And as a matter of fact, George Knapp is to be congratulated for giving me the name of Bob's high school. That's how I made contact with them. Was George gave me the name of the school. So
if he went to Pierce
he was
College, which is here in Los Angeles, did I go to high school here in Los Angeles as well?
No, this was in New York.
Ah, so you went
New York
coast
State.
to coast, literally. Okay.
Yeah, this goes back. I mean, he's in his 50s. He's not well, he's a lot younger than I am, admittedly. But so, as I say, I don't know what Jeremy said, but I do know that Dr. Krangle verified that Bob worked at the lab and had a security clearance and was thought to be a scientist, but he had done nothing to validate, verify, whatever you want to call it, that was true, that Bob was a scientist who worked, and certainly nothing to say that he worked on back engineering flying saucers. And Krangle agreed with me that talking about 500 pounds of element 115 seemed way beyond reality.
And what element 115, one thing I thought that was really interesting about it was, didn't German scientists not too long ago, I say within the last 5-7 years, maybe earlier or later than that, actually were able to create it? Or
well, yes. I mean, look, it had been expected. It's a uranium element. That is, uranium has the highest atomic number of all elements, naturally occurring elements, 92. And it was known, well, we knew about neptunium, we knew about plutonium. These are higher, but they are basically man-made. When we have atom bombs using plutonium, it's made by taking uranium and putting it in a reactor and gradually building up plutonium. It doesn't occur really worth talking about in nature. So there's a whole batch of theoretical nuclear physicists who worry about high atomic number elements, 113, 115, 117. And it had been talked about. There were articles in Scientific American. Finally, several years ago, there was a big accelerator that was operated for roughly a month and produced 4 atoms of element 115. We made a lot of measurements to get the particles that were coming off from that. And then it had to be confirmed at another facility. It was a joint American-Russian, and then the Germans were in Darmstadt, I think, were involved, to verify that indeed, altogether we probably made 100 atoms. And to do anything useful, you need, say, a pound would be 10 followed by 23 zeros atoms. So 100 won't do it, and it has a very short half-life, under 2 seconds in the isotopes that they found. And it's easy to say, well, maybe there's a long half-life element, isotope. And there's not the slightest indication of that. And yeah, we're talking about an island of stability. How's that for a great phrase? That doesn't mean it isn't radioactive. It means it's much less, it has a longer half-life than the other ones. But they're talking about elements up with the atomic numbers 300, or atomic weights 300, not element 115. So Bob didn't predict it. He made a claim that that's what they use. And he got that information from a Scientific American article, which talked about element 115. How are you going to dispute somebody who says, well, they're using 115, when ain't nobody able to get it at the time? So finally we got a big accelerator, ran it long enough. Somebody put out some good money for that. And, hey, 4 atoms. That's exciting from a theoretical physics viewpoint. Does it tell us anything about flying saucers? Not a darn thing.
We got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to go in any direction you want. But first, let me go back to element 115 and in elements in general. The fact that they decay so rapidly, does element 115, I mean, how long or how good is it, or how, what's the decay rate on that versus other elements?
It's half-life. Well, there's a whole range of half-lives. Half of it's gone in under 2 minutes.
Ouch. So really, this is something that decays faster than anything else because of its half-life.
There were shorter half-life elements too. There are elements that decay in microseconds.
Oh.
So there's a whole range, but 115 with less than 2 minutes ain't long enough to do anything with it. You can't accumulate it if it's not there. I mean, in contrast, the power supply for the Horizons, the New Horizons, the Pluto craft, is plutonium-238, which is radioactive. And it decays about 4 parts out of 238. The half-life is many, many years. So that you can accumulate. The half-life of cobalt-60 is 5 years. So we use it in a number of facilities around the world. But that's long enough for you to get some use out of it. 5 years for only half of it, you still got half of it. Not 2 minutes, not 10 seconds, but 5 years. So you got the whole range of lifespans, if you will. And, it's not surprising that it's that short, because all the transuranium elements, especially over element 100, have quite short half-lives. I'm sorry, that's the way God created the universe, if you will.
Now, let's go back to the first story, or should I say the last story I left. And then we could talk about this or as long as short as we want, because we have under 10 minutes before we hit the break. And of course, okay, I want you to have the final say in whatever you want. The fact that all these, actually we have a caller too, but the fact that we have all these finds from NASA, what do you think the implications are that really the rate of these Goldilocks planets is skyrocketing? Now, if you want to briefly answer that, and then we could take the caller who asked the question before we run out of this hour, by all means.
Well, there's no question that we've had a change of heart. Frank Drake thought several years ago, he's big in the SETI movement, that there might be as many as 8,000 places in the galaxy that could be sending signals. So you're looking for a needle in a haystack, which place out there can we find? Okay, a good estimate today of how many planets there are in the galaxy is several billion. That's a conservative estimate. There's over 100 billion stars, and some people think every one has got at least one planet. But let's be conservative. Let's say there's only 5 billion planets in the galaxy. So that's exciting, but it's good to know that we're not the only solar system. So I'm not surprised at that. I wouldn't have given you a number. How do you have a number when you don't know? This is something you measure. And the
Yes.
Kepler is done.
Fantastic
Remember
stuff.
now, it's looking at a space in the sky about the size of your fist at arm's length. It's not looking around all over the place. And in that small region of space, it's found well over 1,000 planets. Now, how many are going to be the same size or close to it as Earth? We don't know yet. That's exciting to find out. How'd you like to make measurements and say, "Ooh, I found a solar system with 6 planets in it," and I found some where they're no more than twice as heavy as Earth. Wow!
Let me just make this one comment that you've said in the past before I bring this caller to ask you a question. And like you've said in the past, of all these cases, whether it be with UFO cases or all these planets that we're looking for, if only one turns out to be extraterrestrial, literally, if only one of these UFOs has aliens flying in them from another planet, or only one of these planets have intelligent life, then end of mystery. It's solved, because all we need is one. That's it, one.
Right.
And I think that's just a fantastic thing that so many people forget. We don't need to analyze 10,000 cases or 10 million. Maybe we need to analyze that many to get to that one. But once we get to that one, end of story. Let me bring on this caller, and
Okay.
I actually know who it is. He called the other night. This happens to be Lou Sheehan. Lou Sheehan, welcome to the show. Do you have a question for Mr. Friedman?
In some sense, yes, Dr. J. Good evening, Mr. Friedman. I had the pleasure of meeting you briefly at Contact in the Desert.
Oh.
You gave me a name of another MJ-12 suspect. But I'm calling in because, according to Wikipedia, I'm just telling you this, and I have two related things. According to Wikipedia, the half-life of element 115 is 220 milliseconds. Now, I can't vouch for Wikipedia, and I don't mean to overly correct you, but it's much worse than you're even saying. It's not 2 seconds.
I'm trying to
it's
be
220.
conservative.
Well,
I'm saying
excuse
it's
me,
under
sir.
2 minutes. That's for sure.
That's true.
There's a special on Nova Science now with Mr. Tyson, and they
Neil
say that
deGrasse Tyson.
they expect the island of stability to be at 114, not 115. It's about a 17-minute show. It's excellent for anybody who's unfamiliar with islands of stability and creating these elements at these high levels. Again, I'm just trying to get Dr. J and his followers to watch it, and I assume some will. But it's simply an excellent
When is
video.
that show? Do you know?
Oh, it's past. It's available online in high quality. I believe it's either 14 minutes or 17 minutes, because I watched it again the other day before, after having spoken to a previous guest. I'll be happy to send it to you. I at least have your old email address. I'll send you a link to. If I can dig out your email address, or if you want to leave it on the show.
Well, if you look on my website, it's there.
Right. Will do. It's excellent. Absolutely excellent. And again, so thanks for
Dr.
your...
Tyson, is the guy who said that our fastest craft would take 70,000 years to get to the next star, the closest star, and so forget about interstellar travel. He forgot to add one little detail. It doesn't have a propulsion system on it.
Well,
it's like throwing a bottle in the ocean.
Two things, if I may. SETI. I just want to make sure I understand.
Lou, I just wanted to warn you. Go ahead, ask these questions, but we do have less than 5 minutes before break, before he's got to go.
I'll give short answers.
Go ahead.
Sure. This will be relatively short. The signals that they look for, those signals essentially are not. If a being from another planet sends a signal, it's not going to blanket the Earth. They actually have to send a signal. It's still narrow. It's rather narrow, and SETI's receptor has to be exactly lined up. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Freeman?
That's right.
Bad? Oh my God!
It's very difficult. It means it's very difficult. It's like pointing a gun and hoping you hit somebody 100 miles away, but you don't know where he is, and you're just doing it randomly. So, the whole SETI thing. There's a whole chapter in my book, Flying Saucers in Science, about SETI and the problems with SETI as it's presently conceived. That's why I call it a silly effort to investigate.
Oh, it's more than silly. It's hyper silly. But nevertheless,
hey, I'm conservative.
Well, thanks again, Mr. Friedman.
Okay.
Thank you, Lou, for calling, by all means. Mr. Friedman, we have a couple minutes before break, so
Yes.
I actually want to turn it to you to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Well, these are exciting times. I'm looking forward to my trips coming up, the lectures I'm going to be giving, the response to them. We'll gain recognition for MJ12 in a couple places. It's an exciting time, and I think the world is moving in my direction, and it will be interesting. I'm going to be at the American Philosophical Society Library, and I'll be looking at some of the debunker materials. And when I do that, normally I find more things to say, oh, these guys are crazy. That makes no sense, or that's not true, or stuff like that. But you got to have the facts in hand before putting your mouth in gear. So I'm excited about being able. I was supposed to be there last year, but the heart attack got in the way. So I'll be there this year. I'm looking forward to the 50th anniversary of the Exeter incident, that aircraft refueling operation below tree height. That's a rather magnificent thing. It says here in small print. And I'll be, for those in Canada, I will be in Liverpool, Nova Scotia. I've never been there, down on the South Shore. And talking about crash saucers. I'll talk about 5 of them. 3 in New Mexico, and then Kecksburg, and Aztec is in New Mexico. And there's another one. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And for people, I'll even give out my email address because it won't get jammed at this time. FSPHYS. That stands for Flying Saucer Physicist. I tried 10 other things and none of them worked, so I picked something nobody else is going to have. FSPHYS at bellalliant.net. BELLALIANT.net. So I'm reachable. I do respond to emails. I even answer. Somebody was surprised I answer my own phone. Who else is going to answer it?
I actually remember you telling the story of once when someone called and you actually answered, and they were blown away because they were like, "Well, wasn't there supposed to be a secretary or something like that?"
I don't have a secretary. I'm a one-man operation. I do my thing, and I'm lucky to have had a chance to do that for all these years. I'm blessed with long life. At least I'll be 81 on the 29th of this month, so it's coming right up.
Ah, really? That's
and both
actually
my parents
6 days.
lived to be 90, and so I got 9 more years to go. That's good enough for me.
Well, with that being said, we have to wish you happy birthday. And if you have any final words, with that being said, we have to go to break. So I'd like to thank you for joining us, Mr. Friedman. We definitely have to have you on again. And if I don't speak to you before your birthday, let me wish you a happy birthday now. On behalf of me, on the network, everybody else out there, and I'm sure Art Bell when he hears about your birthday coming up next week. So
I'll look forward to doing this show.
Thanks again. You have a great night, and everybody stay tuned. When we return, we'll come back with Tom Schaefer, author of 2 and the Collectors. We'll also be taking some calls and have much more fun. We'll be right back.
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
Welcome back to Hour 2 of Dr. J Radio Live. Did everybody like that promo with Art Bell? He is truly the man. And as you know, he comes on right after this show. Remember, we broadcast twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday, bringing you top guests. Like I said early on in the very beginning of the show, I take guest requests very seriously. Near the end of the show, I'll be talking about some other upcoming guests, as well as where you can hear so many of the previous guests that have been on over the 3 years. But first, let's bring on back our second author, or should I say author of Two and the Collectors, who we seem to have lost and is coming right back. He is our Hour 2 guest. But first, let me tell you about the website. Again, as I mentioned, Dr. J Radio Live, you can, of course, get your you could contact us there. You could see the YouTube links where you could hear the past listeners. More importantly, you can also pay attention to the news, UFO news. And as you hear each show, we listen to the news. So we definitely need them there. We definitely need the news to be coming from you, the listeners, at each and every show. I could pick them off the internet, but it's much more fun when we get them from you, the listeners. So definitely we need them out there. I also want to give out a shout out to everybody in TuneIn, tunein.com for the chat room out there. And of course, the Twitter chat room, who happens to be part of, darkmatterdigitalnetwork.com. We need more of you in there. So if you have any questions, by all means, definitely continue to bring them on via the network. And all you have to do is use hashtag DMTalk, Dark Matter Talk, DM Talk. And that way it'll come up in the Twitter feed. And if it's a question, I will read it. I will read it to the guest. Sometimes it's a very controversial question, but it is what it is. By all means, I will absolutely say it. With that being said, we still lost our guest. So what we'll do is, if anybody wants to tell their own UFO story, you can call in. The call-in number is 818-923-1713. Again, 818-923-1713. In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you some more UFO news. And I only limit to 3 in the beginning of the story, because at the beginning of the show, because we want to get to the guests. I know you guys tune in for the guests, which is the whole point of the show. So that's the reason why we bring them on. Actually, as a matter of fact, I believe I do have someone who I could bring in right now who can talk about his experiences for a moment at the time. And this happens to be someone who's been taken aboard craft, an alleged alien abductee. Chris Brown, you're on air. Welcome to the show. Your audio is not very good. Can you fix it?
Well, I wasn't expecting the.
Oh yeah, it was last minute. I know. I just received your chat, and I figured, we might as well use it. So let's talk real quick about your experiences before we go more into, of course, the other author was supposed to talk about. Well, we missed his book, Two and the Collectors, but alien abduction. I always say this because I think it's a super important topic. Yes, you could see craft in the sky, but we don't know if they're military. We don't know if they're extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional. We don't know. But if you want to know what's happening with, say, an extraterrestrial or a creature that doesn't originate from, what if it's underground? But the point is, if it's not Homo sapien, who is the best person to ask? You ask the people that deal with them, the people that have been taken. If you want to ask, what do they look like? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they communicate? Because some don't talk, they use their minds. Alien abductees or contactees are the ones that we speak to. And that's why I think that topic and crash and retrievals are my absolute 2 favorite. So, Chris Brown, before we bring our author back, who we lost for a minute, I want you to spend a couple minutes and tell your story, because I want people to know about you, because I just released an exclusive interview with you and the other person who's been taken, Adam Ambrose, which is available on YouTube. So let's spend a few minutes and talk about your abduction.
Actually, it wasn't an abduction. What it was is my son and I, and jump right to it on the 27th of August 2011. We had a close encounter with a UFO orb 6 feet from us, and we could see perfectly inside the orb. I got to jump right into it. I made a Photoshop of it, of what it looked like, but it was a bubble that was around a sphere around a basketball size, a beach ball, and in the middle of the sphere was a red glow, and it was spinning backwards, the orb, while it was going forward, and in the middle of the we could see it was in a teardrop shape as it was spinning backwards while it was going forward, and it was making a chopping noise real fast. And let's kind of get right to the reason I called is because the show was about Element 115, and I never knew anything about Bob Lazar. I knew about him years back,
Wait,
but
are you talking about you didn't know about Bob Lazar during your encounter? Because
Yeah.
excuse me, see, I was confused because
Sure.
when we had that exclusive interview, obviously I let you and I believe his Adam Ambrose, that's the name he used. He wants to be a little incognito, so that's the name he chose. I let you and him talk, so I sort of kept it as
Sure.
an abduction talk. Do you think you had missing time? Let me ask that first question. Before I ask the second question, was it that you didn't know about Bob Lazar when this occurred?
No, well, I'd heard about the man, but I knew nothing of what he had talked about, nothing at all. And I had no missing time. We really were out there. It was no missing time from my wife. That had her friend over at the time, or anything. But then again, I don't know. Maybe if far as I'm concerned, they like something could have happened, and I would have never known. But no, but no, we really didn't know anything about Bob Lazar. And then when I called MUFON and told them what had happened,
What year was this? If you don't mind refreshing my memory.
2011.
Okay, so this was recently,
Yeah, and
years
so
ago.
my anniversary of the 4 year is just going to be on the first encounter, the 18th of August next month, and then the 27th will be the 4 year anniversary of the second encounter. And so, yeah.
Well, I think that's very fascinating. Now, before we bring on our author, who we lost and he's back, let me ask you: do you think you had any missing time? Because there was a reason why Adam asked to have you to be part of that conversation. See, what happened was, for everybody out there listening, it was a 2 hour show. And the hour one happened to be the one and only Jack Osborne, son of Ozzy and Sharon Osborne, who happens to be super duper interested in aliens, abduction, and everything else involved. And hour two was abductee Adam Ambrose. Now, that conversation carried on for another 2.5 hours. And Chris Brown joined in, and what we did is said this was so fascinating, we decided to record the entire thing, and so all of it is released uncut on YouTube, and anybody can hear it. If Chris, I'm sure you know about this already because it's been out there. It's under the YouTube channel Dr. J Radio Live. But again, do you think you had missing time?
I just don't know. I'm really, gosh.
I mean, just think of. Did you look at the clock by any chance, and it may have said 11 p.m. and then all of a sudden you don't remember what happened? It was like 3 a.m. I mean, is it just faded memory or anything that would indicate some sort of some anomaly?
Nothing that is that from when on the second encounter. On the first encounter, I was alone, and we're having to jump through it. I had my iPod with me on that, and I had the time on it when I was trying to get video recording. Now on the second encounter, we're just done with the movie that we were watching that night, and that was just getting over. My wife's friend was just getting ready to leave, and so everything that happened in sequence, because I can't get into all of it, seemed to go into the fact that my wife's, she didn't say, "Hey, what happened? You guys were gone." So no, but I wonder. Because here are so many people say, "Well, are you sure?" And yeah, I thought about doing repercussions, sure, and being under hypnosis, but that's money I don't have, and really, I'm scared, Dr. J. These have been heavy-duty memories that I've lived out on on the radio. I'm scared. I'm scared to find if I was abducted. It stresses me out, just this encounter here, and so I'm trying to get myself out there, and I thank you for helping me, by the way.
I think it's very important, and I say this as often as I can. Everybody out there who's had either just seen something, actually met a being that either came from another planet, another dimension, underground, wherever you want to call it, because I don't know, are apparently there's so many. I mean, that's the best part about being involved in paranormal investigations. The deeper you go into the rabbit hole, the crazier it gets. I mean, really, truth is stranger than fiction. But I encourage everybody out there to tell their story. We're never going to get worldwide acceptance or just so-called disclosure unless people come to terms that the laws of physics as we know them are not necessarily what govern the entire universe. And that is why there happen to be craft that travel faster than what we can even imagine, or some indicate altering gravity. It's just really, really fantastic. Now, I want to ask you one final question before I bring on Tom Schaefer. You said you had something to say about element 115.
Yeah, I knew nothing. All I could say is the look of it. The look of the cherry glowing red. I wanted to actually call in and talk to Stanton. I had messaged Stanton probably a couple years back, but I really, to just kind of tell him and the way that it looked, because for I read what Bob Lazar, talked about and stuff, but I mean, all I could say, it was just cherry. It was like looking at lava, but it was cherry red and glowing red. And, I'm like, all I can do is just tell people what I saw.
Well, I'm very happy you did. And before I let you go and bring on our hour 2 guest, I'm going to actually go ahead, in case you missed it, I'm going to go ahead and give out again Stanton Friedman's email, because he so kindly gave it out in hour 1. So I'm going to go ahead and read it out now. If FS, like flying saucer, PHYS, like flying saucer physicist, as you recall, FSPHYS at. Now, here's the hard part. The second part, rather than being a generic one such as Gmail or Yahoo, it happens to be a very complicated one. So you might want to write this down or wait for the rebroadcast of the show. It's Bell, BALLIANT.net. BellAliant.net, but not alien with an E. Bell, BALLAIANT.net. So it's a very, very weird combination. So one last time, Chris, I'm going to read it for you and anybody out there listening. If you guys want to grab a pen, right? Ready? Here it comes again. This is Stanton Friedman's email address. If you have anything you want to say to him, whether it be a comment, a question, anything you want to say, he actually encouraged you all to reach out to him. He's turning 81 in 6 days. So go ahead, take advantage of his invitation. Again, one more time, FSPHYS. Again, that's like flying saucer physicist. FSPHYS. Get ready for this part. At Bell, BELLIANT.net. BellAliant.net. BELLIANT.net. You got it? Got it, Chris. Thank you so much for calling in.
Got it. And thank you very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I encourage everybody out there to hear the very interesting story with Adam Ambrose, because he has got so many parts to his story that we couldn't fit into that show. We actually couldn't fit into the rest of the interview, and that's why we brought Chris Brown, who had a lot of fascinating stuff to say, and he's definitely going to be joining us again in the future. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you.
Now, let's turn to Tom Schaefer, who sadly dropped out beginning of the hour, but he's back now. He happens to be the author of Two and the Collectors. Now, here is the problem. Two and the Collectors was written as a novel, but so many people that have read it have actually written to Tom and said, is this is this really a cover for a nonfiction for something that really happened to you, or is this something given to you in a dream? So, Tom, welcome to the show, and let me ask you this question: why do so many people think your book was real?
Hey, Dr. J, man, good to talk to you. I am excited. I tell you what, I this gentleman you just had on, he's the evidence. He's the evidence we're looking for. Okay? These are the people that are experiencing. Me, I'm an Imagineer. Okay? And if people tell me that they think it was a vision, I'm not going to argue with them. Maybe it was. I think what we're finding out in science and in what some people call pseudoscience, there's starting to become a bridge between the paranormal, what some people in academia dismiss as, that's just, it's a bunch of pseudoscience, these guys are just yakking. They're just making stuff up. People are finding out that the science is starting to admit that it doesn't know what it think it did. It's kind of a crude way of saying it, but there's so much that we don't know. There's just so much that we don't know. So anyway, my book, it might be a vision. I don't know. I don't see it that way personally, but if other people are telling me that, who am I to argue? Maybe it is. Maybe it's a vision,
I got something really interesting that just came through the hashtag DM Talk Twitter feed, and this is really cool because a lot of people talk about this, including Bob Lazar, Nassim Harriman, who everybody will happen to hear in the next show with Art Bell, Midnight in the Desert, or you can actually hear it on YouTube in the last interview I did with him on June 2nd. And this question, or should I say it's a comment, if you have the power to generate mini black holes, you have the power to manipulate time. Einstein said so. And what do you think about that statement? Because when Bob Lazar, in February, when he spoke at the International UFO Congress, he made it very clear that if we have the power to control gravity, things that are science fiction are literally thrown away and turned into science fact that day. We would then have the ability to create force fields, to alter time, space, therefore, time travel.
Exactly.
Wormholes.
See, there are people, this is the whole frustrating thing, is that we have a suspicion, people in the UFOlogy community, scientists that are sympathetic to all of this, we have a suspicion that the government knows what's going on, that they've already known, that they've, you listen to Dr. Greer speak, he gave a talk in May, I believe it was, where he talked about knowing a man who already had all the formulas figured out for anti-gravity, for teleportation, for a lot of these sciences, the big three, anti-gravity, teleportation, and alternative energy. This guy figured it out, and they sequestered him away, and this guy has been, he's under lock and key basically at the point of a gun. So there is this suspicion that our government or some controlling entity has these secrets, that mankind figured them out on their own, and they've been corroborated by the fact that we've been getting these visitors from other places, either other places, other times, other dimensions, etc. So the logical mind says there's a certain amount of plausibility to these concepts. It doesn't seem that far-fetched to those of us that entertain science, that we enjoy science. I'm just a hack. I'm not a scientist. I'm an Imagineer. And when I hear these concepts like, wow, they just found this planet, Kepler 452, or wow, the possibilities of anti-gravity, or wow, they just figured out in a lab that they can create using high-powered lasers, the concepts of replication are on the dawn. We're in the primordial soup of all these concepts right now. And yet some of it may be sequestered away. The public domain is starting to see light of some of these things. And so we're in this rocks and sticks dawn. We're like those apes that are kind of surrounding the monolith in 2001. That's where we're at. We're kind of like looking at these advanced concepts. We can't replicate them. We can't, it's like trying to give an iPhone to an ape. There's no way he's going to be able to understand
Actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, because Bob Lazar, when people asked him, I think it was George Knapp who asked him, have we been able to replicate or back in reverse engineer this? They reverse engineer the sports model, the alien craft that he was working on. He chuckled and said, heck no. And that's equivalent to throwing an iPhone to a wagon train in the 1800s and saying, here, make us 500 of these,
Right. So listen to this idea then. So here you have now this new openness in our society. You know, this gentleman that was on before talking about his experience, and you guys have got 4 hours of
Yes.
discussion.
Yes.
I mean, we could sit around the campfire and listen to that stuff because there's a huge openness. We want to know. We want to go there. So my book is a playground for these concepts. And as much as it's science fiction, science fiction is the playground of what if, and part of the workaday world is to remove all of that. Your workaday world is to show up for work, shut up, do what you're told, and get to work. We don't have time for all that imagination. You need to get to work and you need to produce. Science fiction is a timeout. Science fiction is the playground of the mind. It's time to play. It's time to say, well, this Kepler 452b, wow, what if we could go there? That would be awesome. We can't go there. Well, we need transportation. So the mind begins to think, wow, if I just had some sort of transportation, well, if I just had life support systems, we're very close. And if we had the propulsion systems or the ability to jump space, we would be there in orbit right now. This idea of traveling at 23,000 miles and taking 10 years, 23,000 miles an hour and taking 10 years to get there is silly. And we're going to look back, if we survive, we'll look back 10 years from now. When somebody stumbles along in the next 10 years, the ability to use some technology for us to jump space, and whether we figure it out on our own through our own scratching and digging, or if we are assisted, we will find a way to jump space. We will find a way to make it across space. And then it'll really be a matter of what can you take with you and how long will it last when you get there? And that's what my book describes. It describes a secret space program that's been instituted by help from outside.
Well, let me ask you this question, and this is something that actually astronaut Story Musgrave talked about in an exclusive interview we did with him, which sadly didn't make it to the airwaves here on Dark Matter, but you could hear it on my YouTube channel. And it was a one-on-one interview. It's actually 2-on-1 with my co-host, Johnny Webb, who's in London, but is now happened to be in Indonesia for the next couple months. And he was talking about the ethics of colonizing other planets. What happens if we go to another planet and we start terraforming it so us humans can move to it? But what if by terraforming it, we end up killing the life on it? Even if it happens to be microbes or
well, you're introducing a lot of hypotheticals. Let's just work with what we know right now. For example, there's this whole concept of going to Mars and we're going to colonize Mars. Well, what are you going to bring in the NASA framework? What's going to happen within the NASA framework? Those people that go are all going to be within whatever framework they brought from Earth.
Yes.
I doubt there's going to be a new government. I doubt there's going to be any kind of a change. They're going to be living under similar conditions as to what we have here. It's just a survival.
Don't forget, worst part is a lot of these people who have volunteered, there's no return mission. Once they go, they're going to stay.
And so this is all within the rocks and sticks technology that we are experiencing right now that some people laud as the greatest advances of mankind. It's not that great. We're barely scratching the surface and we're barely getting off this planet. And it's like you mentioned one time before, and we have nuclear weapons and we're running into space, exploding weapons into space. There's a lot of problems with mankind. There's a huge segment of mankind that's very advanced in its thinking. It's very high level in thinking. There's a huge segment, the things that Dr. Greer talks about. There's a high level out there. There's a group of people with a higher consciousness out there. And yet we still have on this planet, we have greedy, the greedy military industrial complex. We have the so-called, what conspiracy theorists like to relate to, the Illuminati, and God only knows if any of that stuff's true. But there are controllers of this planet. And there are murderous religious ideologies that, like Bill Maher said, have, like Islam is a religion of bad ideas. We have these conflicting societal segments on this planet. You don't have a unified planet reaching for the stars as a unified race. We have a pocket of people that get it, and then we have giant segments that don't, and then we have even more segments that don't care. and they're only out for what they can get in this lifetime, and they're more worried about paying their bills, and they don't even have any clue about a higher cosmic perspective. And so those are the things that we're struggling with. And those are some of the things that I deal with in the book, this concept of colonization. And the whole thing, as I began to kind of unravel the onion on this, is I don't think we're going to be able to do it without help.
Yes.
I just don't see it happening without help.
Well,
that's me. That's my opinion.
Let me throw a few things out there. First of all, I'm glad you brought up the military-industrial complex. If everyone recalls, when Eisenhower left the office of the presidency in 1961, handing it off to President Kennedy, who won the election in 1960, what did he say? Beware of the military-industrial complex. Now, why would someone who was president of the United States, purportedly the most important or most powerful nation in the world police, who was the supreme Allied commander during World War II, who was credited for essentially
take it from a general.
Yes,
take it from the general.
Yes, taking
exactly.
it from the general, essentially winning the war by planning and launching the Normandy invasion. Right? Why would he say such a thing when he was part of it?
Too, Dr. J, there's also this lore too in ufology, is that he was shown a holographic image of the crucifixion of Christ by ETs at Area 51. I don't know how much of that is true, but he's sitting there and you go, okay, maybe this guy did have an inside track on what's really going on in ufology. I don't know. But take it from this guy, he understood at a higher level. And you think people want to think that people in the past didn't have insight. This guy had incredible insight, and needs to be given credit. And he talked about the cost of the military and what we could be buying at that time in those dollars, what we could be buying versus spending the money on missiles and bombers, what we could buy, fixing our infrastructure. We have the capacity as a planet to solve world hunger. We have the capacity to solve every shelter problem. There's a lot of logic that we're all asked to excuse. Oh, don't buy into that. For example, if you look at it from strictly kind of a logical standpoint, we have enough technology to house and clothe and feed everyone on this planet.
But we don't. We spend it all in arms, in warfare.
Well, even still, we could still feed, clothe, and house people. But we add a lot of what some people would call, we add a story to this. We say that, well, some people deserve, some don't. You need to work for this. You need to be part of the slave industrial complex. So there are layers that are added to the simplicity of the logic, is that mankind actually has the technology to feed and clothe every human on this planet with surplus. We have the technology, but we don't. So my book takes us away from this planet. My book takes us into a place where an advanced race becomes kind of the fatherly help. Kind of like, okay, you folks have messed it up. We're going to show you a better way. Now, I know there's another story out there that's already happened, The Childhood's End, which is coming out, I think, this fall. But that story, the benevolent aliens in that story actually wind up becoming not so benevolent. In my story, they stay benevolent. They really want to see humanity succeed. And so they've terraformed a planet, and they've created a place for us to go to that launches us into other places. So the story is really the launch of a kind of a science fiction franchise.
Let me say this to you. Linda Moulton Howe actually says that our planet was terraformed starting 270 million years ago.
It's quite possible. Why would it not be possible? Anything is possible. I'm learning every day that anything is possible.
Well, Murphy's Law, what can happen probably will
Think about
happen.
the stuff that scientists dig up now. There are archaeological discoveries of artifacts that don't make any sense, hammers and iron things and gold things that don't make any sense. There's a hidden history to planet Earth that we're only got a glimpse of. The pyramids that could not be connected by normal technology or communication methods, and yet these pyramids throughout the planet have similar sacred geometry to them. Okay, come on, something's going on or has gone on in the past that we haven't been given history to. So my book says, okay, let's just take it for a ride. Let's just say these people came back. Let's say that they have good intentions and they want to help us move to the next level. That's what the book's all about. And it's a playground for the exploration of these ideas. And what would we do when we get there? What kind of government would you have? Well, you're probably not going to need a whole lot of government.
Let me say something really interesting to you. This actually came in from the Twitter feed, and this is from Dan. It goes by at Don Dan L, and it says rocket tech will not get you to another planet. It's all for great big propaganda fireworks. Simply
Exactly.
can't carry the fuel. I
Exactly.
believe that because, if you think about it, what sort of mass would you be able to have have the amount of energy to travel at the speed of light, or to use the sort of, okay, let me ask you this question. This always bugs me. Why are we using ancient technology to fly to the stars or the moon? Why
you
are
have
we
a lot of
using
people.
giant fireworks? We're burning chemicals. This is so old. I mean, why?
Right. Well, then you have two tracks. There are people that believe there are two tracks. There's the public track using mainstream academics and accepted mainstream academics. The college track and the NASA track. Okay, and then there's the dark space program that nobody knows about, and they're already using jump rooms. They're already using all of these technologies. So we have two tracks. So yes, it seems absolutely silly to be using 1,000-year-old Chinese rocket technology to go to the stars. That's just silly. So if they're spending trillions of dollars that they create on their own to go these places, and these resources are allocated, and there's already what some call breakaway civilizations where they've already gone and planted human colonies for the sake of furthering the human race, blah, blah, blah. We don't know if any of this stuff is true, but it's good. It's plausible. It's highly plausible that these technologies are already being used. And I think the only way you could travel the giant reaches of space would be through some sort of, quote, jump technology.
Or black hole. Exactly. Like it's instantly like a black hole, where a wormhole essentially was something that bends.
I have a
space.
sense that it's not really a black hole, but it's a jump, that it's a quantum jump. Because now we hear
let me ask you this. See, I wouldn't know this technology or this sort of science, but maybe you can answer this question. What would be the difference between a quantum jump and the ability to create a wormhole, which would essentially be bending the fabric of space, instead of, having a straight line to point A and B, folding it together and just instantly traversing from one to the other?
Here's what I think, and I get the question. Here's what I think. I think that we think in terms of creating this giant, okay, he's going to create a giant portal, and it's going to be this giant thing out there, and then they're going to go through it. I think that it's as advanced as these people are, these entities, these ETs, whoever they are. I think when they do it, for them, it's like it's like electricity to us. It's very simple for us to generate electricity. For them, that moment is very simple. It's as simple as as an example as what we saw in that TV show, Battlestar Galactica, the latest one. They made an announcement and said, we're going to this point, and boom, we're getting ready to jump. You didn't see a lot of special effects. They just did it. And I think that's the level that whoever's doing that's coming here, it's that simple. It's really more of a light switch technology. It's not something where there's a big dramatic, get ready to go to hyperspace, get ready to open the portal, get ready to open the gate. I don't know. We don't see those in the sky. Maybe that one over Norway was something like that, but we don't see that. We see them showing up, and they just do it. So I think in the future, or whatever we come up with, I think it's going to be very simple. Quantum mechanics is finally admitting that observing these things in quantum mechanics actually disturbs them. So there's a lot we don't know that we're just now discovering, that in 5 years, everything we're saying right now is going to be deleted. It's just going to be silly. It's going to be silly to even admit that we said what we said, and that these races, what they are doing, coming here with the advanced technology they have, we just look like jungle tribesmen to them, and so, or less. And so I think we, like Mr. Friedman was saying before, is the arrogance of science to think that we know. We don't know. We're just stumbling into things right now, this is a great age. We're just now breaking through. And if the technology has already been discovered and sequestered away from us, and this other track is just, the public track is just now being exposed to it, is that by plan? Is that by accident or by design that now they're revealing some of these things? Like they can't hide all of those space station UFO footage. It's getting more difficult to hide it all the time. I just don't see that they can hide it from us anymore,
That's right. And you're absolutely right that they can't hide it for that much longer because the technology that we as civilians have access to is rising at such an exponential rate. You have to take that into account. And one thing I love, and this is confirmed by people who work in military, especially in special ops, such as Navy SEALs or Delta Force. Okay, the technology we have, if we're just using scales and I'm rounding up numbers, if what we have, the best thing is, say, the latest iPhone, well, then what the normal soldier going into the battlefield would have something that would be maybe 5 to 10 years advanced, something much, much better. But then when you jump to something such as the Navy SEALs, then you're talking something that's maybe 2 decades in advance. I mean, they were using, at least I knew of a Navy SEAL who doesn't believe in conspiracies, does not really participate in anything what we said, except to tell me that this took years of me breaking him down to talk about his missions of when he was a SEAL, that after he was a SEAL, he ended up being a mercenary and did 2 missions where he happened to contribute to bringing large shipments of cocaine to the United States funded by the CIA. How do you like that? But the point that I was trying to make was that he said that in that year when he served, 66 to 69, the technology he had available to him as a Navy SEAL was much, much better than anything that our regular soldiers had even 20 years later.
Well, that's the thing is that you hear this all the time in ufology is that the dark projects group has stuff that's 40 years ahead of us, 20 to 40 years ahead of everything you see in the public space, and that's pure speculation. I don't know. And then maybe that's from witnesses that have seen it. I don't know. But, in science fiction land, we can break all the rules in science fiction, but science fiction is the great inspirer. It's like I said, it's the playground of inspiration. For example, the communicator in Star Trek is what ultimately led to cell phones. We wanted that. We saw it. We saw them using it. We saw what they did with it, and it became something we all wanted. Before that, it was stuff like Forbidden Planet. And I just happened to watch Forbidden Planet again the other night. It was really kind of a fascinating look at great science fiction, in spite of the lack of, it was not cheesy. The special effects, you could tell, were done very well for that time frame. They were using concepts that even though the film and the special effects of the time were not that great, the concepts were awesome.
Well, let me actually read you a question. I think this is really interesting. This comes from Graviton Fish, a listener, again, from DM Talk, the Twitter feed on the Dark Matter Digital Network.com, the Twitter feed. And again, people in the tunein.com chat room can also submit their questions. Associate producer Danny Benton is out there taking them and, of course, bringing them. So by all means, here's the question that comes through Graviton Fish. How about isolating, or in quotes, pulling a craft off our brain, in parentheses, universe, and traveling the bulk, 5-dimensional space? What do you think about that?
Well, it may be that that's the future, is that we think in terms of space travel in spaceships. We want to get there with our physical bodies. But the future may actually involve going there in a different way. And what we talk about now is so antiquated, as much as we might think of, the smokestack era of the Industrial Revolution back in the 1800s looks as silly to us now. The concepts of space travel in the future may well be a more, in a more cosmic way, if you will, a more non-physical way. It may be remote viewing. It may be advanced soul travel. These things are as the more we get open to what's really out there, the more we take away some of the walls that we've put up about concepts. Oh, that's not possible. Why, this is how it all fits in this box. Well, maybe the box is very small and you need to kind of step outside the box, get outside that box and really enjoy the ride. Allow the imagination because it was given to us. Our imagination is part of the gifting of the human race. And whether it was given to us by gods or whether it was something evolved, I don't care. It came with the kit. It's what you get. You have an imagination. And the more people that utilize their imagination, the more things you take the imagination. Tesla dreamed of some of the things that he actually created. And so the imagination's huge. And so when I tell a story that has no basis in fact, but I'd explore concepts, or when we look at science fiction on television that's really well done, like even bad science fiction or even mediocre, it doesn't matter. Anytime you explore science fiction concepts, you explore space and you explore humanity's interaction with alien species, you're expanding the mind, because then when it really happens, you've prepared your mind for how you might react. For example, Star Trek studied the whole concept of interacting with alien species and what it might be like. It explored technologies that became utilitarian. Warp drive became very utilitarian to those people. They just kick it into gear and go. We didn't talk about whether it was possible or not. It was already possible in their world. We didn't talk about whether replication was possible or not. It's already possible. They just made tea and kept moving. So a lot of what we think is going to be an oh wow moment is going to become antiquated and deletable. It's going to become a non-moment for us in the future. And I think one of the liberating things in the future is going to be replication. Nobody's really talking about how replication is going to free humanity from the work slave trap if it's allowed to progress. Replication will free humanity from a lot, from the socioeconomic slave mills that we live in now. The liberation of replication is going to free humanity. It's just not discussed. But we're looking at the dawn of replication through things like 3D printers, and now they're actually talking about the ability to create matter using high-powered lasers. So replication is going to free humanity, and it's going to change society drastically. And people like Gene Roddenberry talked about it, but nobody really explored it. Nobody really looked in depth at how the first replicators were going to change society. If everybody has a replicator and everybody can create what they need, well, then why do I need to go to work?
I agree, exactly. And that I'm so glad you mentioned that we're still at the pick and shovel or rocks and stone age in that sense, because in terms of civilization, a couple thousand years really is nothing. And really, our real civilization hasn't started since, I would really estimate, since the point of electricity. That's when we've had this giant evolution that's just been going up at an astronomical scale and an exponential scale. And I think if you continued on the path but did not destroy the earth, did not destroy ourselves, we really would be capable of so much more. Can you imagine what 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or 1,000,000 years ahead of us would do, considering if we stayed on the path but took away the killing and deaths. Now, Tom, I want to warn you, we got about 10 minutes left of the show, and I want to go with you with a couple minutes. Then I want to talk to the listeners with you about the show before we go. So by all means, answer that question and then say whatever you'd like to say before we...
All right, you said a lot. What was the question?
Well, I was talking about what do you think the possibilities would be if take this into account. If we've literally started our civilization at the time Edison implemented electricity, or Tesla, started using the AC current, just basically 150 years ago, that's what I really think is when our civilization started to take off. Imagine us 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or 1,000,000 years, minus the war and the killing,
right,
and the the death of the planet.
Isn't that a composite? Isn't society as a whole a composite kind of as our personal lives? How many times have we all been told, you know what, if you just stop self-sabotaging, you can move forward, you can go farther, and we all have to deal with that personally. And so we also have it on a grander scale of society self-sabotaging. You know, we have these murderous religious ideas going on. We have stifling concepts that hold people back. We have a lot of, you know, in the movie business, they talk about suspension of disbelief. We need you to just kind of go along with this sci-fi moment here. But let's talk about reality for a moment. We are asked to suspend logic in a huge part of our lives. And you're right, it cripples us. For example, there are things every day that people see that's like, well, why did they do that? Like I read an article about some city, some guy wrote a big front page, he rented an ad to criticize a police department that wrote a ticket because he parked in backwards. And you think about stuff like that, you think, wow, I thought we were advancing, but I see stuff like this and I see we're really not getting that far. There's a huge portion of our society that is self-sabotaging, that is kind of like swimming down here in the bottom in the mud. And there are people like you and I and a lot of the folks in this community that see greater, we do imagine greater, just to take Sci-Fi Channel's little phrase. We do imagine greater, and we see a greater possibility. And we look at silly stuff going on or murderous stuff going on the planet, these wars and all this stupidity. It's just really, it's embarrassing.
It really is. It really, really is. Tom, we have literally about 7 minutes, and I want to talk about the show. So I'm going to ask you first if you want to make any final statement, and then of course I want you to help talk about the show because you've become an integral part. Let's tell people where they can find your book, because obviously it's created a lot of controversy where a lot of people have accused you of, you know, labeling it a novel when a lot of people say that's actually happening.
Well, it's the spinning of science and science fiction, and I'll let them have it. You know what? If it's a vision, I'll let them have it. But let me just give the book, the location of the book. You can find it. It's called Two in the Collectors.
TU.
TU is the name of the planet. I created a planet, and I created a complete science fiction story around it about a group of people called the Collectors who are taking, is a pre-disclosure team that is bringing things from Earth to this planet, to this other planet, getting this planet ready for the migration of humanity to this planet. So things are already being done behind the scenes. The roadies are getting everything in place. They are the Collectors. They're getting people ready to go to this planet. So it's twointhecollectors.com. It's TU and thecollectors.com. You can go there. You can buy the book. It's on Amazon. And I just encourage people to engage with me in the discussion and to take the ride with me. I want to take you to this planet. There's a government. It's not really a government. There's really less government there. But I invite you to come with me on this journey of what if we could go there, and what would it be like when we get there? What would it be like to have an organic planet that isn't polluted, that doesn't have GMOs? They don't do GMOs. It's all organic. And what would it be like to live in a home that is totally self-sustaining? Things like that. So those are the things that we discuss in the book, and I invite people to come and take a look.
I'm going to say one comment before we talk about the show in general. I thought someone made a really important comment, and actually a guest, Richard Dolan, mentioned this 2 years ago, and then, of course, I saw this happening. This comment, actually, let me go back and find this. This is from, where is it? Observer at PadPow, and this was Replicators is about 3D printers. 3D printers are so fascinating as the first steps to that. I think they are extremely fascinating because all of a sudden, instead of creating a flat design or copying a picture or a piece of paper, you can create, you know, a model of something.
Well, they've got everything from plastics to biologics. There are some 3D printers now that are doing biological medical implants or medical replacements or organ replacements. This stuff is never ending. And this is the dawn. This is like when the Industrial Revolution first started and they started making giant, you know, Rube Goldberg type factories. So that stuff evolved into making microchips. We're at the dawn with replication using 3D printers. And so it'll go from spinning plastic layers, it'll go to some sort of energy that is transmitting actual and creating actual particles from a catalog. So you'll actually literally replicate just like you see in science fiction. So we're at that primordial soup age right now, and to see into the future and imagine what that's going to be like, how will that impact society? How will replication impact society? Right now, you can buy a 3D printer, but a lot of people don't see the need for it because they can still go to Walmart, they can still go to the grocery store and buy the things they need. But if they could create everything they need in their own home, you won't need grocery stores and you won't need UPS. You won't need any of that. It will all occur in your own home. The only thing you'll need is to buy the big things. And then you'll think, well, there's a big replicator down the road. We can go to the library and just create what we need.
And just create it. And
Yes.
a lot of people actually talk about that. Now, Tom, I want to thank you so much for this interview. We definitely have to do this again. I want to spend the next couple of minutes before the show ends to tell all the new people who have joined us lately, gearing for Art Bell, to tune in regularly Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you've been paying attention, I didn't really want to quite relate this, but if you notice, you go to artbell.com and you look under the contact us, you'll happen to say the producer is me. I happen to be the one to book his guests. Part of the reason I was asked to do that was because of the guests that joined this show. As a matter of fact, tonight's guest on Art Bell, Nassim Harriman, was on this very show on June 2nd. This show broadcasts Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern. And every week we do take questions, comments, anything you want, either written, if you want to send out a tweet with hashtag DM Talk, or of course you can call in. The call-in number is at the website. The only name you have to remember is Dr. J Radio Live, DRJ Radio Live. That is the same name for everything, for every account. That is the domain, drjradiolive.com. That is the name of the YouTube channel, Instagram, Flickr, Tumblr, Google+, even a Gmail account, Twitter, everything. Let's just talk about some of the guests who have appeared. Now, I already said that, of course, Jack Osborne, everybody, if you were there, Jack Osborne was on, and he will be joining us again. Richard Dolan was on not too long ago, and he'll be back on soon, and we definitely have some important questions to
Well, you
ask.
just had Stanton Friedman on, which was great.
Stanton Friedman was on tonight, and Linda Moulton-Howe was on this past Tuesday, if you guys caught that. Let's talk about some other people. Robert Morningstar, very, very fascinating guy. David Sarita, Peter Lavenda, astronaut Story Musgrave, former presidential candidate Michael Dukakis, a couple other politicians who joined the show, three of them who happen to be fairly involved with UFOs. Two of them from the Citizen Hearing, Senator Mike Gravel. The only radio interview he's ever done has been here with Dr. J Radio Live, a couple times, in fact. Same thing with former Congressman Cook. And let's not forget the Honorable Paul Hellyer, former Defense Minister of Canada. He is the absolute highest-ranking highest-ranking politician in the world to ever speak about UFOs or anything. Now, I have to say, sadly, about only 50 or 60 of these interviews are uploaded to this YouTube channel. I promise at some point all 250 will get up there from the last several years. Let me just give you a few more names. As I said, the guest you're about to hear, Nassim Harriman, a very awesome guy. He's got some really cool theories. He was on. I got him on because Foster Gamble, the guy who created Thrive, he was on. You could also capture his interview. Some more. Daniel Sheehan. I said Peter Lavenda. Michael Cremo, the forbidden archaeologist, who happened to find a 5 million year old gold mine here in California that happens to have humans in it, 9-foot human, Homo sapiens. How do you explain that? I mean, these are crazy stuff. And this is why I would invite everybody out there to join us. Linda Corteil, do you remember that? She was the lady who was abducted, literally pulled out of her room in a 9th floor story in New York. And this was witnessed, of course, by the UN Secretary General and his bodyguards, and that's what broke the story. There are so many people I can't even mention. Just a couple more. William Henry, Michael Tellinger has been on. Kathleen Martin comes on fairly often. Anthony Sanchez, the guy who talks about the Dulce War. Travis Walton, Dan Willis of the Disclosure Project. Timothy Good, Dr. Greer, Jim Mars, who's coming on Tuesday as another interviews on them again. Nick Pope. Anybody who's been involved in ufology, John Lear, all these people, again, drjradiolive.com. Let's thank everybody who's important. First, we got to thank our guests, Stanton Friedman, Tom Schaefer. Of course, we got to thank station owner Keith Rowland, the Dr. J Radio Live team, my mentor, Art Bell, and the most important, you, the listeners. Remember, drjradiolive.com. This is Dr. J signing off.